Welcome to D&I One-on-One, a bi-weekly webinar series where we talk about different topics related to culture, inclusivity, diversity, and belongingness. In today's conversation, DEI Certifications and Credentials. My name is Jina Etienne. I'm the creator and the host of this series. I'm a certified diversity executive, and my work is centered on something I call fearless inclusion. And I define that as the freedom to be yourself and the ability to create space for others to do the same. I develop trainings and workshops, as well as facilitate conversations and programs focused on helping participants connect mindfulness and self-awareness to their daily actions and words. The goal here is to foster awareness and a collective understanding around organizational intention so that we can create safe spaces where inclusivity, that's our intention, the belonging is the outcome. Today, joining me is Dr. Delmar I, sometimes goes by Doc, sometimes Delmar, whatever. I'm not sure what I'm going to call him. It'll probably change throughout today's program. He served in the United States Air Force for 22 years, where he taught advanced avionics systems. So he was into virtual technology before many of us even knew what it was. He was a master instructor in the Air Force, so he naturally went into teaching after retiring from the military. He taught math, social sciences, adult learning, and philosophy, and across all levels, from middle school all the way to doctoral students. Today, he leads education and credentialing for the Institute for Diversity Certification. And full disclosure, I earned my CDE, the Certified Diversity Executive Credential, from the Institute for Diversity Certification. And it was the curriculum that made the difference for me, which is why I'm so excited to have Dr. Lee with me. Doc, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Jina. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and I really appreciate you having me on. So, can't wait to get started.
Well, you know, we've had a number of conversations ourselves, and in those conversations, we've talked about the depth, the breadth, the complexity of this work. And you know, I worry that DEIB, this is the acronym I'm using now, it's reduced down sometimes to recruiting diverse candidates or how do we retain minority talent, but it's so much broader than that. And so a lot of organizations tap somebody on the shoulder in their organization to do this work, but there's a whole body of complexity and knowledge behind it. So before we start talking about the credential itself or the specific credentials, could you share with us more about this depth and breadth and complexity that is DEI as a profession?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking me that. That's a very good question, and is a point that needs to be illuminated more broadly and more often, actually. There are many people who are practicing and have practiced what we do in the DEI space without having the requisite credentials, and they don't have the foundation to actually do the field the justice that it deserves. And because of that, there's a lot of misnomers and misunderstandings, and to be quite honest, it borderlines on abuse because they didn't take the time to get proper training, get the foundation necessary to tap into the body of work that is available to practice the field. You mentioned DEIB. I think it's important to understand the basics before we get into the nuts and bolts of it. And we look at diversity, just breaking it down one by one. We look at it beyond the differences that are apparent, because it requires an intersectional look at a person. In other words, as we look at a person, look at the totality of that person and look at how he, she, or they may contribute to the success of a business or an industry. Not trying to disadvantage one to advantage another, but to allow every person an opportunity to contribute to the success of any workplace where they are assigned. So valuing people is what diversity should be all about. We talk about equity. The equity is a piece of the equation where we look at what the individual is going to need in that space to be successful. Again, sounds very simple on the surface, but the equity piece is kind of innocuous. For example, you may have, I like to use the analogy of a woman who is the first one as a critical part of a board, a group of power brokers, where the woman is brilliant. She's presenting a perspective that is worthy of attention and should be acknowledged. But instead of being heard, every time she voices her opinion, someone else speaks over her, or someone else tried to squash her. And then as soon as what she has said is echoed by someone else, some other male, it's, it's praised as the best idea ever. Equity would allow that person's voice to be heard and appreciated in that space because she is there and is valued. Mm-hmm. The inclusion. The old saying with inclusion was diversity without inclusion is bad for business. Because if you are a face in the place, not being acknowledged for the value proposition that you bring, you're just there for the look of it. Lily Zing referred to this as excuse me, as being performative, mm-hmm. which is a problem with a lot of businesses and industries. In other words, they look like they're doing a great deal. And as long as the lights are on and the cameras are watching, or the attorneys are present to make sure that what they should do is being done, they're doing it. But as soon as that audience leaves, they go back to business as normal. The belonging piece. This, to people who don't know, say, well, this is already covered in DEI. Belonging goes a little deeper. And this is the type of information you can only know if you've taken the time to learn the craft to the level where you can articulate it in a meaningful way. So when we look at belonging, we're talking about an individual's feeling of sense and right. connection. In other words, right. we're dealing with a talent pool. We got a group of people coming in who we call Zoomers now, right? They come into the place knowing what they want before they get there. If we have done what we're supposed to do, they'll be able to find meaning. Mm-hmm. And the belonging piece will be a part of them wanting to stay there once they get there.
So when we talk about the body of work, then it's understanding all of the different areas. That includes HR, that includes business strategy, that includes growth and development, that includes stakeholder relationships, that includes vendor management. It includes understanding how creativity and connectivity ties and supports innovation. Understanding actually a lot of the different communities that fall under the umbrella of, I don't particularly care for the term, but people say diverse people. People inherently aren't diverse. A group is diverse, but I'm not a diverse person because maybe people are uncomfortable with saying Black woman. I don't know. But even understanding all of that. Let me do this. Let me launch our first poll. So Christine, we can launch that poll because then we can talk more about this.
No problem, Jina. I've just launched poll question number 1. Which type of DEI credential are you familiar with? Please let us know in the next 60 seconds.
One of the reasons I think this topic can resonate is I'm in the accounting profession. I'm a CPA as well as a CDE. I also have a credential called the CGMA, Certified Global Management Accountant. I believe that's what it's called. Lord knows there are a lot of certifications and credentials in the accounting space. So I think one of the things, certainly for you to know, is that the audience we're talking to, we understand that different certifications bring different levels of assurance to the people who are hiring us. And so I think that's where I really want to emphasize in today's program that same differentiation happens in this profession, the profession of diversity and inclusion work. So let me see, where are we? Have we pushed the results? Is it still open?
There we go, Jina. It's on screen now. So which type of DEI credentials are you familiar with? The leading answer here was neither with 73%, 9% said both, 8% said certifications, and then we have a tie for certificates and prefer not to answer.
So that means the majority that are with us today aren't really familiar with certificates or credentials. And so maybe that's, if we talk about the body of work, it's ties to all aspects of the business. Then why do people need to get a DEI credential when so many people are just getting tapped on the shoulder, especially women and minorities? You're a minority, come and do the DEI work here. Without any experience. Passion is great, but passion doesn't get me there. So the first slide I have up here is value of credentialing. Are you there, or didn't you freeze up?
Oh, I'm here.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. A question for you, Mr. Dockley, okay. Delmar.
Well, I was thinking, as you were saying, there were so many points of entry. I was okay. Yeah. I want to go back one and hold the slide up here. You mentioned one of the problems with doing our work, and it's understanding the language and using it correctly. And I like the example that you used where a person who's not trained is very prone to say diverse person, which we know in our field is redundant because every person has all these other aspects of them built in. But if you don't know, that's what you promote. Now, a part of the problem also was that these are the very same people who are being tapped on the shoulder, as you mentioned, who may have created, let's say, a following, or people like them, or they were good at supervising. So you're a good supervisor and everybody likes you. You can be our DEI person.
Well, you know, what's interesting about that is that it reminds me about, especially in this profession, you're really good technically. You can be a really good accountant, really good at what you do. And as a result of that, you get promoted to be a manager in an organization, in a firm, but nobody taught you how to be what management is. So the assumption that you know the technical skill, that means you can run from a leadership perspective, I think that's where you're paralleling this here. I might understand identity, but that doesn't mean I can lead D&I work.
That's correct. In the DEI space, what we do acknowledge is that the human personality is one of the most complex things you can work with in any workplace dynamic, regardless of your field. Let's say I'm dealing with you today and you're in a great mood. Tomorrow you may come in a different place, in a different space because of something else that's happening with you, to you. If I haven't done my homework to understand what else is going on with you, if I have not taken the time to get to know you, I cannot meet that Jina that day. Right. So the person who I think I'm dealing with is not even in front of me. And because you liked me yesterday and I haven't had to deal with this side of you because I haven't been trained to deal with it, I have a problem in front of me instead of an opportunity. As you said, you can be technically trained to do something.
So how does this move us beyond HR then? Because actually, you know what I'm going to put up here? I'm going to put up here, we talked about body of work. And so I'm going to just click through, I'll put this slide up and then have the other one sit here for a moment, because all of the topics that you see here on the slide are pulled out of the content that is covered in the credentials. And you're going to talk about the Certified Diversity Executive, the Certified Diversity Professional. We have some other certificate programs that are included in the slides if you've downloaded the slides. I would encourage you to do so. What you've been talking about so far is really the human element, but looking here, there's so much more. There's the approach to the bottom line, data analytics, what your role is as the practitioner in an organization. Building the business case requires subject matter expertise in the connection between diversity, the humans that are diverse, and the way they show up and lead and drive innovation and growth in an organization. So all of these are part of that body of work.
And every one of these.
The other side of it. Sorry, I wanted to keep putting these up on the slide so that we had them there.
Okay. And every one of these have necessary components that allow the DEI practitioner who has been credentialed to have that conversation, because every one of these is an aspect of what's needed to make a business, an industry, or an institution successful.
Right.
Now, let's go back one more. We talk about credentialing, where we looked at certification versus certificates. Do certificates have a place for a person's learning and I'm going to say even advancement, or even if you're building a resume? Absolutely. But the limitations of certificate is that it's a one and done. It's designed to be episodic. I just mentioned that in doing what we do and dealing with the people that we have to deal with is highly complex. The human personality cannot be reduced down to one thing. That reductionist approach allows us to deal with complicated matters with a very simplistic approach. By looking at the competencies that you listed and looking at all that's required in order for a practitioner to do what we do, to do it well, says not only do we do what we do from the people side, because we are people focused, but there's a business case for the establishment of that department, because we work in conjunction with HR, with accounting, with any place where there is a person. The thing that distinguishes HR from DEI is HR tends to be very employer policy focused with the people mentioned. we are entirely people focused because we realize that the true success of appreciating the triple bottom line, the people, the planet, and profit, is appreciating the people who are in any business, any entity. So we work to develop that.
What I think so resonated for me and why I pursued a credential is, as a CPA, I had my own firm for 17 years, and I sometimes struggled with prospective clients or new clients that came in, and they thought an accountant and a CPA were almost interchangeable terms, not understanding that an accounting degree is a certain body of knowledge. But when you pursue and successfully complete the requirements to become a CPA, including an exam, a proctored exam that has minimum requirements to pass, and then the need to continue to maintain your continuing education, it's really important to know that that credential validates that knowledge, and not just the knowledge, but the skills that go along with it. In fact, I'm going to put this up here because you could put a list together of what it takes to sit down and pass the CPA exam: the education, the experience, the exam process itself, and the continuing education. So, sorry.
That's okay. First of all, speaking to the value of credentialing, and I like the fact that you mentioned that was what we are calling a capstone component in what we do. In other words, a practical application of the knowledge that you acquired from the curriculum piece. In other words, how is what you learn going to benefit you when you get back to your workplace, when you get back to the university? Well, by being able to produce something that says, I have completed this curriculum, I have a way of operationalizing these concepts in a meaningful way, to where they have utility not only inside the workplace, but outside of my working life, says I am beginning to understand what's required to appreciate this craft. Now, you also mentioned the standardized test. We have one. And we work with the Ohio State University to work for, matter of fact, we're about to be accredited through the accreditation process, to say that not only have you required the hands-on practical knowledge, but we have a standardized test to ensure that you have the rigor required to appreciate the field and then convey the information in a meaningful way.
So when you talk about a credential, so I am a certified diversity executive, but if somebody is a CDE or CDP, let's talk about what we do for a living. So does that mean, I'm making up questions now on behalf of our audience.
Sure.
Does that mean that you should expect somebody who's a CDE or CDP to do everything? Or does it work the same way in my accounting life? I might have been a CPA, but I also had specializations. I specialized in tax. Didn't mean I didn't know the body of work, but it meant I really knew one area well. I did one thing well. Is that also true in this space?
Here's the thing with the CDP, which is Certified Diversity Professional, and the CDE, which is Certified Diversity Executive. We give you the body of work. You learn from people who are experts in the field, who have a lived experience in a multiplicity of venues. We provide you with a foundation. So you're not an expert upon graduation. That comes with on-the-job training. In other words, you have to do this thing for a while to get the expert knowledge to be able to talk about it from that perspective. But you do have a really good idea, depending upon where you're functioning in your organization. The CDP itself is designed for people who are managers or supervisors, who deal with the day-to-day interactions of business and industry. At the CDE, the one that you acquired, are people who talk about the strategic planning, sustainability of business and industry, what it looks like to create a place where every person is welcome and that's operating at a high performance standard. So, no, it is, as you said, I wouldn't take a screwdriver and say, well, I have a screwdriver in my hand. I think I am an expert plumber. I wouldn't let that person in my house. They have a tool, haven't known how to use it, and they haven't had time to perfect the craft. The same thing is required to do what we do. You cannot take a person from doing one thing who says, okay, he's good with people, and then say, now you can lead an organization on a DEI initiative. That's a recipe for disaster. One more thing to mention, just one.
Absolutely.
And I like, because you all are CPAs, this number should resonate profoundly with you. If it wasn't last year, it was the year before. where $3.4 billion was put towards DEI efforts by people who probably shouldn't have been practicing in the first place. They gave the impression that it was not a good idea, not good for business. For industries that have
sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
one last thing. For industries that have deployed it properly, it shows consistent increases in productivity, in retention, and in every aspect that positively impacts the bottom line.
You know, I don't want to sort of disparage all of those people who have stepped into the void, if you will, in their organizations, because some organizations don't yet understand the business case, and so perhaps they haven't invested dollars, or even if they have invested money, maybe it's programmatic, and so they still need people to help support those programs. And to them, I would say, understanding this body of work is important, because even if you aren't certified or you don't have a certificate, it is important, I think, to just understand all of what is encompassed, because even for HR people, I'm going to put this slide up here. I grouped these competencies together because they relate to the human piece. There's a lot more to this, that even if you don't have a credential, you can still do this work. So I don't think, you know, what Dr. Lee is saying here is that you shouldn't do this at all unless you have these credentials. But I think the point I'm hoping that we can make here is there's a lot to this work. And too often in the press and in the media and in articles, you only see a sliver of it. You don't hear about all of the work that lies behind, you know, diversity leads to boosts in innovation. But you have to understand some of the dynamics that are happening behind that, the human behavior pieces, the psychology pieces, business and HR pieces, and tie all of that together to get from the what to the why, or from the how to the why. I also wanted to put this up here because there's a question in here that asks if we can discuss DEI as it relates to the disabled. It says, I recently became disabled, and I don't see in your slides where the disabled are included. And to that, I would answer, I'm looking on this slide, and you know what? I don't specifically see it here either. Let me go to the previous slide. What I'm looking for is the importance of human resource practices as it relates to serving all of the different identities in an organization. So 1, 2, 3, fourth bullet down on the right side of this slide, disability, accessibility, and accommodation is one of the areas of competencies that you have to study and understand as part of this credentialing process. So I don't know, Scott, if that answered your question. If not, drop another question in the queue, and I'm going to keep an eye out for it.
Can I just add very quickly?
Absolutely.
Scott, if that's your name, Scott, this is a reason why we do what we do, because important components, people who can otherwise provide critical, I'm going to say critical skills to any business, industry, or institution that can make a quantum leap in how they do business, have been historically ignored. And the reason for that competency was to bring that fact to light. We're having an entire summit on neurodiversity because that's another entire demographic of people who are significant contributors to success with businesses and industry that needs to be shined a light upon them. It is for these reasons. It is for this reason that we suggest that you get the training necessary so that you can appreciate every person who is capable of providing an advantage to business and industry.
I'm actually looking forward to that conference. It's in a couple of weeks, I think next month. So I've gone ahead and Christine, if we can open the second poll, where is your organization on their journey?
All right, poll number 2 is up. If you don't see it on your screens, please let me know in the questions box. Where is your organization on their DEIB journey? We're going to keep this open for another 50 seconds.
I really like this poll because I think understanding the context of where you are right now, and for all of you listening, some of you might lead D&I, some of you might be curious to consider pursuing work in DEI. Actually, there's a question here I'll get to in a bit. Or just have a better sense of what your organization is doing in this space. And so I don't know if even just the options on this question can help contextualize some of this work, because DEI is more than training on uncomfortable conversations. And there are some best practices around what organizations can be doing in terms of strategy, in terms of action plans, in terms of priorities, benchmarks, and success measures. So I can see here, go ahead, Christine, the results.
All right, so I've just closed poll number 2, and where is your organization on their DEIB journey? The leading answer here by 30% is nothing in place, but would like to get it started, followed by 23% of attendees saying have a DEI strategy and an implementation plan. 21% say DEI committee with organizational structure and budget. 18% voted for done some training and would like to explore new topics. And finally, 8% said defined our DEI business case with goals and benchmarks. Back to you.
Really interesting because they're kind of scattered across. Any thoughts as you see these results?
Each one of these are an opportunity to actually engage with, and here again, I'm going to promote us because it's what we do at the IDC, to engage a professional that can tell you how to develop each one of those areas properly, to appreciate the opportunities that have been started, and then continue them through completion. Every organization starts at a different place on their DEI journey. The beginning to actually making the progress that you want is understanding where you are and being supplied with the tools to know how to move the needle in the right direction continuously. It's not going to be an explosive change. It's going to be incremental progress that's specifically designed for continued success.
Yeah, DEI, DEI is, I describe it one of two ways. One, it's boiling the ocean. So you're not going to do any one thing. The other thing is it's a long game. It's like innovation. It's like business growth. They never stop. It's iterative work. And so long as humans keep showing up at work with all of the different dimensions that make each of us up, this work is gonna continue.
Absolutely. Let me add one more thing. Here's the thing we like to lead with, and that is understanding that the people who are business owners, CEOs, boards of directors, and all these other entities that are designed to make sure that business is successful are doing the best they can with the information that they have at that time. What we do is create that space where people who are required to make decisions have the best information possible to make more informed decisions that are going to give them the long-term impact that Jina has mentioned that's going to benefit the company for the sustainability piece, which is endemic to what we do in the DEI space.
So I put this slide up here briefly earlier, but could you talk about some of this in a little more detail, in particular, the candidate project? I think you might have suggested it.
Yes.
In the old school days of the CPA credentialing, and I have to tell you honestly, I'm not sure if it's like this in any state anymore, but it used to be in many states, you graduated from college, then you had to have a certain number of years of experience before you could sit for the CPA exam. So that way you could demonstrate what you said. I come out with book knowledge, but I don't have work experience. And so the candidate project, though, doesn't it address for some of that? Because I remember when I had to submit mine, I submitted an original body of work that I had done, put together some research and built a program, and that's what I submitted. So to some degree, getting these credentials does bring in the experience we already have coming into the program?
Yes. One of the requirements to satisfy whether it's a CDE or CDP, first of all, is to have performed in the role. If you're going to be CDE, we prefer that you be in a leadership capacity for 5 years or more, such that when we engage in the conversation, what we talk about is more meaningful. If it's for the CDP, it was 2 years or more.
Oh, these are backwards, my bad.
That's okay, the numbers are reversed. It's no big deal. Just a matter of keyboard. But the point of the matter is, we want the persons to have a decent foundation before we build on what they already have. So if you don't have the requisite time already performing in the role that we're training you to the next level for, you have to get that before you come to see us. Once that is established, as I said before, with this project, we're going to give you something that operationalizes the concept that we teach you. In other words, we're going to give you something you can actually use that are going to benefit you either as a consultant or whatever capacity that you're in, or as a part of your DEI department to make sure that the company can when you change this, so that the company can benefit from the recent skills that you acquired. So in other words, this capstone program is designed to show you how to benefit the organization by your experience with us.
By the way, I fixed it. While you were talking,
yes.
I fixed it so the CD now says 5. and the CVP
One
master.
last, before I became the global vice president for the IDC, I actually evaluated literally thousands of these projects. What we do at the IDC to ensure that our learners are set up for success, we allow you one-on-one conversations to put you on the right track, to set you up for success, to ensure that when you are done, it is something that is viable. You can't just make up something in fantasy land and say, I think this would benefit somebody somewhere, somehow.
Right.
No.
Has to be rooted in actual work, right?
Absolutely. That's why your time in the position is necessary.
Somebody asked this question that says there seem to be, they rate considerable prerequisites for these certifications. What should somebody newer to the DEIB space for education do for education/certification? That's Monica's question.
So what should they do?
Yeah, so what should they do? So somebody's newer to the space. They don't have these years of experience.
Right.
What should they do? And do certificates play a role here as a way to get some foundational education before you go after a credential?
This is where certificates could actually advantage you because you are getting some knowledge in the space. Again, you're still going to have the mandatory required time performing in the role that you're going to be using the credential. However, by getting these certificates, which is introductory to what we do in certification, it will provide you with an inroad. So there are ways to acquire information outside of the rigor that you see we assign to complete our programs to prepare you for success for what's come next. Because here's the thing, those credentials that we're mentioning, unfortunately, everybody can't complete the program. It's not designed that way. There are some people who really try and unfortunately they fail. As a CPA, I'm certain every person who went to you're smiling already. Everybody walking around is not a CPA. There are many people who go to law school,
they never
play
passed
around
the bar.
a long time in law, but never become an attorney because they haven't passed the bar. The same rigor, the same requirements, it should be required to do what we do in the DEI space. Right now, because we're the last person in the game, so to speak, the value proposition isn't really embraced on a broad scale. It's already known to be a strategic imperative. It's been used since the 60s. It's just now we're making it more apparent and more available for more people.
No, in 2 weeks, Dr. Surrett is going to be joining me to talk about universal design for equity. And, you know, when we were talking about and planning for the session, one of the things that we're going to walk through there, in case anybody's interested, is this history of DEI. Because this work has been around for a minute. It's nothing new. I think post George Floyd, there was a flourish of awareness around this, particularly centered around understanding race in this country, which is a blessing and a curse because unfortunately it over-focused D&I on race. Sure, these are important conversations to have, but I think it's important to appreciate that there's a long history of this work in a number of different aspects of business. And so to your point, by the way, I have on the screen, I went out and looked up a number of certificate programs. I know some colleagues who have done a couple of these. You can see down here like HRCI, that is specific to HR management. Some of them are very focused on a particular area or a particular skill or competency. For example, there are certificates that you can get that talk about coaching as opposed to management. So I just wanted to put that out there because for Monica's question, what can you do? Some of these are, and by the way, some of these programs are not cheap. I think there's one here, I won't name names, but I think one of them is like $8,300. So price alone, I don't think is a measure for value.
No, especially in this.
I think you can pursue a certificate in advance of a certification, especially if somebody works in an organization where they can't sort of raise their hand and be given an opportunity to do the work in some capacity in their organization.
Let me piggyback on what you just said there. The strength of what Jina just mentioned is this. Many of our learners come from those certificate programs to get the rest of what is needed to present something viable to the workplace. So we're not discounting certificates because they do have a place. The certification, if you look up, there's a body, the Institute for Credentialing Excellence, which is the governing body for most certifications and licensures in the United States. has certain requirements, and those are the rigors and the standards that we hold ourselves to in our certification processes to ensure that when you do complete these rigors, you are ready to do something and become something of substance to wherever it is you perform, like I said, as a consultant or as a critical part of a business or an industry.
So there's a really interesting question in here, and I won't try to say the first name because I don't want to mispronounce it, but there's a very interesting question in here about AI and how AI might impact DEI, because there's a lot of talk today that artificial intelligence tools and resources can replace some of the work that is happening in a lot of jobs. Do you believe, we hadn't talked about this in advance, I'm actually curious to hear your answer.
That's fine.
Do you believe that AI can replace the work that we do as practitioners in this space?
I'm going to answer you as an expert in the field, of one who taught down to the ones and zeros who knew about AI before it was popular. No, it is not designed for the complexities of human personality. As a matter of fact, the engineers who design AI will say the thing we're trying to do is design components that are built for repetitive action.
Mm-hmm.
The very thing that we were talking about initially about who shows up to work on successive days is the very reason why AI could never do what we do. We deal in people. And the reason why we do is because everything else that can be reduced down to a repetitive action is subject to be replaced by or enhanced by AI.
Yeah.
So, and speaking more directly about AI, expect some displacements because it's coming, it's here, and it is highly effective in what it is designed to do.
Yeah.
But this thing right here is ahead of AI, always. This is what AI came from and cannot replace yet. When we reach the point to where AI can be approaches what's called general intelligence, then we'll talk about something. Right now, the best it has for all practical purposes is something called serial transduction, which is it acquires terabytes of information and to anticipate what will be a logical response to a common question. Hope I didn't get too crazy with the answer.
Well, what I would add to that, because I completely agree, for those who are doing work in this space, particularly those who aren't certified or aren't doing the work, I'm an outside consultant, so I come in as the subject matter expert and help the organization where they are. But some people are inside their organization and they're given one element and component of that. Where I think AI might help you, speaking to whoever you are listening, is that it can help you do research in a way that is a little bit more synthesized. It can help you brainstorm things. Like, for example, let's say somebody in their organization is a volunteer leader of their employee resource group, or they are on a diversity committee that oversees all of the employee resource groups. And you're looking for ideas. How do we celebrate different awareness days or heritage months?
Perfect.
AI can help you with that.
Perfect.
What AI can't do is help you understand all of the important, the reasons why we do these things and how it relates to human resource management and policy and all of that. But you can definitely get ideas for things to execute. So there's a tip for everybody.
Yes, and let me add one thing. This is not to discourage the use of AI. It has a utility.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay? In fact, I love it. But you use it for the tool that it was intended to be, just like a pencil or anything else. Okay?
Agreed. So I want to switch gears here. We have about 10 minutes, and in the 10 minutes that we go through, folks, please put your questions in the queue. I'll be bringing them up as we go through. Let's go ahead and launch our third polling question, which is, what is that question? What is required to obtain or maintain DEI certifications?
All right, we have just launched poll question number 3. We'll keep this open for 60 seconds.
While that is open, I do want to start us moving us into the direction, if we could, Dr. Lee. There are a couple of slides. We won't have time to go through them all, but just touch on them. I have on the screen, you can't see it right now, but the one called The Stages of DEI, A Journey in the Field. I think that touches on the survey question, because the survey question is talking about what do we need to maintain the credential. Yes. What is the work? What is the life cycle of this work, and what do weave our way through as practitioners, and how does that then relate to what you're requiring of somebody like me to keep my credential?
Okay. I
That
can't
makes
see the
sense?
slide, but I'm very familiar with what you're saying. Did the results come up?
The results are here. Yep.
Yes, so let me read them off real quick. Which is required to obtain or maintain DEI certifications? Majority voted, 85% voted for all of the above. 6% said prefer not to answer. 5% said specialized curriculum, skills, and competencies. 3% voted for professional development, continuing education mandate. And finally, 2% said demonstrated proficiency exams. Back to you.
You know, that was a trick question because it's all of the above. Just like with our licensure. Yeah.
Okay. This image indicates how, as you mentioned early on, Jina, was that this has been around for a while. The problem with its existence previously is that it was done wrongly. Affirmative action established a moral argument for the inclusion of people in the workplace, or at least the consideration, and it was necessary and it was good. We have progressed beyond the moral argument, understanding that it is still needed, but we operate on a business case and a sustainability case. We mentioned earlier on that every entity begins its journey at a different place because depending upon what was done prior to our coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the businesses were standing and operating just fine before we got there. And we're not here to replace what's already there. We're here to provide the and function. You've done great, and there's more that you can do to ensure you'll be here 15 or 20 years from now. So this, as I say, the snake of a journey indicates all the things that are required of your DEI journey to ensure that you maintain and reach that point of sustainability, where you start to value diversity. You don't look at it as a deficit. Different does not mean less. It's saying we're bringing something critically different that's going to add to your value proposition and as a bottom line aspect. Managing diversity. Once you establish a diversity and equity and inclusion program, it has to be managed to ensure that it remains viable. What we do is changing almost daily. It's nuanced. Like you said, AI can't replace what we do because of the nuanced characteristics of every person. And as we proceed along the snake, you go to a high performing environment. In other words, with every person being valued, by creating a space, that space where every person is valued. We talk about psychological safety. There is a way to do that. It's being used kind of willy-nilly and haphazardly, without understanding what it really means. Creating a space where if a person has a different opinion, there's a challenger safety that's available, such when that person speaks, he, she, or they will not be punished for speaking out. And with the inclusion of those multiple concepts, you start to approach the key to sustainability. In other words, you're getting ideas, you're getting innovative perspectives because you're getting perspectives from a person, from a direction that wasn't originally available because our minds are programmed previously to normalize things. So we have to bring people in who are different, to give us that different lens to which to view an opportunity. Again, we start at different places.
Yeah, and it's part of the reason why you have those continuing education requirements, why you have, it's not just subject matter, but it's skills building. So actually putting together a strategy for getting buy-in from your leadership. There's a process for that. Understanding how to create momentum in an organization, there's a method for that. Understanding how to facilitate uncomfortable conversations. And I don't mean the uncomfortable conversations post George Floyd. I mean some of the really challenging discussions we need to have with executives and leaders and managers in just understanding where, how, and why DEI affects an organization. There's another slide you have here, and I want to just touch on it very quickly because you mentioned this earlier, so I just want to put it here. That business case is a very real thing, and it's unique to every organization. They're fundamental truths, but then there are how it manifests itself in organizations is going to be a little different because every organization is different.
Yes. Here's the thing we like to say about the business case. I want to speak about courageous conversations if I can get back to it, but the business case is absolutely essential. And here's why. For every entity that exists inside of a business or an industry, the business case has been proven and substantiated for it to be there. Where there is no business case for that person, for that department, it shouldn't be there because it's not cost effective.
Yeah.
You all who are CPAs understand clearly. If it negatively impacts the bottom line, then there's no reason to maintain it. If you cannot substantiate a business case for the DEI, there's something you're not doing, which you should come to see us. Yes. And appreciate the persons that are required to make that place successful. We understand that up to 80% of a business is systems and structures. That other up to 20% are people components. DEI is about people. Back to the courageous conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We're working to change the narrative because what people are calling courageous conversations suggest that only a few can have it. If we reframe it to say this is a necessary conversation, we can all engage in it without a blaming mentality that was a part of the initial introduction of D&I at that time into the workplace, where every person will feel welcome speaking in that place and be embraced for coming. The blaming and shaming has to be changed to more calling in instead of calling out.
Can you tell me that phrase again? I will be using it. Not in, what did you call it? Framing conversations? Is that what you called it?
Oh, changing the conversation from one of
You said not uncomfortable conversations.
Oh, necessary conversations.
Necessary. Thank you. I didn't.
Yeah, necessary.
I like that. I've never heard that one. I'm using it, totally stealing it. Thank you. I also want to put this slide up here because we are starting to see more people talk about this, that
Yes.
there is a connection between, it says here diversity and sustainability, but I think diversity in this case isn't just the demographics of humans, right? Diversity is all part of, when we talk about sustainability, there's social responsibility, there's activism, there's advocacy. There are a whole lot of different other approaches and areas that DEI either can provide opportunity for an organization or help minimize risks and threats to an organization. So I just want to put this up here. I don't know if you want to touch on it a little bit because this doesn't get a lot of airtime.
Okay, I can. I'm going to be brief because this in itself is at least an hour-long conversation. But here's the thing I want to say about this. DEI and sustainability are inextricably connected. Now, I will say this. Think about it from the perspective of what's called environmental and social governance, or something called corporate social responsibility. There was an initiative. I was reading an article out of the EU, where they're actually looking at the pay structure that's going to be established, or going to be questioned to see if how it is established is actually equitable by making it more transparent from the highest rungs of pay to the mid-level, and then looking at that, there used to be an equation, 10-to-1 or whatever it was. But through these processes, they've actually vetted 50,000 companies in the EU, 3,000 companies here in the United States. Now, I wish I could think of the executive order, but it was actually put into law December 2022 to be enacted in, I think, January 5th of 2023, with the repercussions or the outcomes to be measured beginning in 2024 and looking at how it impacts the U.S. directly. So this sustainability as it relates to corporate social responsibility and environmental social governance is going to become one of the hottest tickets in town for people who are trying to remain viable in the business space in the United States next year.
Yeah, no, and I also think we're starting to hear, as I mentioned, we're starting to hear more about it. I'm grateful and happy to see that these conversations are starting to pop up. It's going to be more in the bigger organizations, but I think for those of you who work in smaller organizations, this might be an opportunity for a way to get your organization to explore more, to maybe get a little bit more curious about it, because it takes it out of what can feel like political correctness, or it can feel like we're only doing DEI because it's the right thing to do because of the humans involved. And getting past that and seeing it from a different lens, this just might be one of the approaches that can help.
Can I piggyback one more thing just before we leave that? Because
I think your audio dropped. I can't hear you. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. But I'm sure what you wanted to say is an amazing point. You know what you could try doing? Unmute yourself and then unmute and see if it reactivates, because something like that has happened to me. before. Okay, well, in case he can't, I'm going to just share one or two.
The
Oh, there you are.
CPAs and the people who are the chief financial officers specifically.
Okay, now your camera's frozen, but I can hear your voice. So how about this? We're at the end. We only have like 3 minutes left. I thank you for joining me. I mean, I know you and I would talk. Yeah, I can. And I know we've talked in the past, and we could just keep going because there's so much to talk about in this space. We do know somebody asked in the Q&A if there were grants available to help pay for certifications. And although we can't speak to all of them, you do have an offer to make for those who are interested in pursuing or exploring the CDE and the CDP.
Yes, and I'm hoping that Christine can put that in the chat. We have a 50% off for enrollment in our program right now, our flash sale. It is an awesome, awesome sale and an opportunity to get in at a much reduced cost. And we're setting up our 2021 schedule as we speak. So by all means, this will be a great time to actually contact the Institute for Diversity Certification and find out the particulars about enrolling in the program. We'll be glad to have you.
I'm also open to anyone if they want to ask me about my experience in studying and pursuing and what has happened as a result. I'm happy to talk. My contact information is not on this slide. You'll have our bios in the handouts, and in the handout it has all of our contact information. So thank you, Dr. Lee, for joining me. This has been as always, a great conversation.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.